Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
Participating in today's technical briefing on the National Advisory Committee on Immunizations, or NACI's guidance for the Janssen COVID-19 vaccine. Bienvenue au briefing technique sur les conseils du Comité consultatif national de l'immunisation pour le vaccin contre la COVID-19 de Janssen. Today we will hear remarks from NACI's Vice Chair and Chair, Drs. Shelley Deeks and Caroline Quash. Dr. Howard New, as well as Matthew Tunis from the Public Health Agency of Canada, will also be available to answer questions during the Q&A session. Aujourd'hui, nous entendrons les allocutions des Dr. Shelley Deeks et de Caroline Quash du Comité consultatif national sur l'immunisation, de Dr. Howard New ainsi que Matthew Tunis de l'Agence de la santé publique du Canada seront disponibles pour répondre aux questions lors de la séance de questions et réponses. Note that the content of today's briefing is for attribution. If you wish to ask a question, please press *1 on your phone. Veuillez noter que le contenu de la session d'aujourd'hui est pour attribution. Si vous désirez poser une question, veuillez appuyer sur étoile 1. We'll now begin today's technical briefing. Over to you, Dr. Deeks.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon, everybody. Dr. Quash Ten and I are pleased to be here to present two key updates to NACI's guidance on the use of COVID-19 vaccines in Canada. As a quick reminder, NACI is an independent committee of experts that provide evidence-based advice on the use of vaccines. NACI assesses how to use authorized vaccines to achieve the greatest public health benefits. We analyze the spread of COVID-19 in Canada and the risks for population subgroups. We review vaccine safety and effectiveness data from clinical trials and real-world studies, and consider the availability of other vaccines to develop advice on the equitable use of vaccines in immunization programs in Canada. NACI continues to review evidence as it evolves. This is why Canadians should expect NACI to update its guidance as new data become available. We are in a time when new evidence is emerging rapidly. Provinces and territory considered NACI's advice when designing their immunization programs, but the policy decisions rest with them. COVID-19 continues to cause hospitalizations and death across Canada, and some jurisdictions are experiencing devastating rates of illness and hospitalizations, straining their healthcare systems. Vaccination is essential to end the COVID-19 pandemic. NACI encourages Canadians to get vaccinated to protect themselves, their families, and their communities from illness, hospitalizations, and death from COVID-19. Canada now has another COVID-19 vaccine available to them. On March 5th, Health Canada authorized Johnson & Johnson's Janssen vaccine for use in individuals 18 years of age and older. NACI's guidance is being issued now as the vaccine becomes available in Canada. The Janssen vaccine is a single-dose viral vector vaccine that can be stored and transported at normal refrigerated temperatures. In clinical trials, the single-dose Janssen vaccine was 67% efficacious in preventing moderate to severe symptomatic COVID-19 infections across all age groups at least 2 weeks after receiving the vaccine. The vaccine was also highly efficacious in preventing critical illness and hospitalization. In addition, preliminary evidence suggests the vaccine offers protection against the B.1.351 variant of concern, first identified in South Africa, and the P2 variant of interest, first identified in Brazil. There is currently no data on the P1 variant of concern, first identified in Brazil. As with the AstraZeneca vaccine, there have been confirmed cases of vaccine-induced immune thrombotic thrombocytopenia, or VIT, after administration of the Janssen vaccine. As of April 23rd, 17 cases have been confirmed following the administration of more than 8 million doses of Janssen vaccine in the United States. The U.S. Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, NACI's U.S. equivalent, held emergency meetings to review the safety signal and concluded that the benefits of Janssen vaccine outweigh the risk. Similar to the AstraZeneca vaccine, NACI weighed the benefits of the Janssen vaccine in saving lives and protecting populations against serious complications of COVID-19 against the risk of developing VIT. At this time, based on the current evidence, NACI recommends that, similar to the AstraZeneca vaccine, the Janssen vaccine may be offered to individuals 30 years of age and older without contraindications if the individual prefers an earlier vaccine rather than waiting for an mRNA vaccine and if the benefits outweigh the risk. This recommendation provides provinces and territories with recommendations on how to optimize the use of the Janssen vaccine in their jurisdictions to achieve the greatest public health benefit. The public health benefit risk analysis for the use of the Janssen vaccine may vary between jurisdictions because of the differing epidemiology. Provinces and territories adapt NACI's recommended age threshold based on their unique circumstances, including local COVID-19 epidemiology, local vaccine supply, and logistics and equity considerations. For example, as a single-dose vaccine, the Janssen vaccine may be better suited for populations that are harder to schedule for a second dose. Health officials can refer to a risk assessment tool in the updated statement to help them determine how to use the Janssen vaccine. NACI continues to preferentially recommend authorized mRNA COVID-19 vaccines due to the excellent protection they provide and because VIT has not been associated with the mRNA vaccines. NACI notes that Canada has procured and is expecting enough mRNA vaccines to fully vaccinate the currently eligible Canadian population before the fall of 2021. NACI has also reinforced its recommendations for vaccination during pregnancy. NACI recommends that a complete vaccine series with a COVID-19 vaccine, preferably an mRNA vaccine, may be offered to pregnant individuals if the benefits outweigh the risks for the individual and the fetus, and if informed consent includes discussion about the evidence of the use of COVID-19 vaccines in this population. A recent study in the United States showed no safety signals of concern following the administration of the mRNA COVID-19 vaccines during pregnancy. In addition, the treatment of VIT during pregnancy, should it occur following vaccination with a viral vector vaccine, can be quite complex. For these reasons, NACI preferentially recommends the use of mRNA vaccines during pregnancy. At this time, NACI also continues to recommend that people previously infected with the SARS-CoV-2 virus be offered a complete series of a COVID-19 vaccine. In the absence of one-dose vaccine effectiveness data in people who were previously infected and limited second-dose safety data, people with previous SARS-CoV-2 infection should continue to receive a complete vaccine series regardless of the severity of their previous infection. NACI will continue to monitor the emerging evidence on this topic and will update our recommendations as needed. For additional information on NACI's updated recommendations, including the evidence and rationales behind the recommendations, please visit the NACI webpage. In closing, I would like to highlight that NACI continues to review evidence and data on COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines as it becomes available. We will continue to update our recommendations on the use of COVID-19 vaccines in Canada as needed. Thank you for your time, and I'm going to pass you over now to Dr. Quoc Tan.
Alors bonjour, je suis heureuse d'être présente aujourd'hui avec la Dr Dix afin de vous résumer 2 mises à jour importantes du CCNI sur l'utilisation des vaccins contre la COVID au Canada. Pour rappel, le CCNI est un comité d'experts indépendant qui fournit des conseils fondés sur des données probantes quant à l'utilisation des vaccins. Le CCNI évalue l'utilisation des vaccins dans le but d'obtenir les plus grands bénéfices en termes de santé publique. Ainsi, en plus des données des essais cliniques, le CCNI tient compte des données sur l'efficacité provenant de l'utilisation des vaccins en situation réelle, de l'épidémiologie de la COVID-19 au Canada et de la disponibilité d'autres vaccins contre la COVID-19 afin de développer ses recommandations pour leur utilisation équitable dans le cadre des programmes de vaccination. Le CCNI continue d'examiner les données probantes au fil de leur évolution. C'est pourquoi les Canadiens peuvent s'attendre à ce que le CCNI mette à jour ses recommandations au fur et à mesure que les données évoluent. Les provinces et les territoires tiennent compte des conseils du CCNI, mais les décisions en matière de programmes d'immunisation leur appartiennent. Le COVID-19 cause encore des hospitalisations et des décès au Canada et certaines provinces sont aux prises avec des taux de maladie et d'hospitalisation importants, mettant à rude épreuve leur système de santé. La vaccination est essentielle pour mettre fin à la pandémie de COVID-19. Le 5 mars 2021, Santé Canada autorisait l'utilisation du vaccin Janssen de Johnson & Johnson contre la COVID-19 pour les personnes âgées de 18 ans ou plus. Comme ce vaccin contre la COVID sera disponible sous peu au Canada, le CCNI émet ses recommandations aujourd'hui. Le vaccin de Janssen est un vaccin à vecteur viral à dose unique qui peut être conservé et transporté à des températures de réfrigération habituelles. Lors des essais cliniques, le vaccin Janssen à dose unique s'est avéré efficace à 67% dans la prévention d'une infection à la COVID-19 symptomatique, modérée à sévère, dans tous les groupes d'âge, au moins 2 semaines après l'administration du vaccin. Le vaccin a également été très efficace dans la prévention des maladies graves et des hospitalisations. De plus, des données préliminaires suggèrent que le vaccin offre une protection contre le variant préoccupant B1351, signalé pour la première fois en Afrique du Sud, et contre le variant d'intérêt P2, signalé pour la première fois au Brésil. Il n'y a actuellement aucune donnée sur le variant préoccupant P1, qui lui aussi a émergé au Brésil. Comme pour le vaccin d'AstraZeneca, des cas confirmés de thrombocytopénie thrombotique immunitaire induite par le vaccin ont été observés après l'administration du vaccin Janssen. En date du 23 avril, 17 cas ont été confirmés suite à l'administration de plus de 8 millions de doses du vaccin Janssen aux États-Unis. Le Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, l'équivalent américain du CCNI, a tenu des réunions d'urgence pour examiner ce signal de sécurité et a conclu que les avantages du vaccin Janssen l'emportaient sur les risques. Comme pour le vaccin d'AstraZeneca, le CCNI a évalué les avantages du vaccin Janssen à diminuer les hospitalisations aux soins intensifs et les décès causés par la COVID-19 contre le risque de développer une TIV. Présentement, compte tenu des données actuelles, le CCNI recommande de proposer le vaccin Janssen, comme celui d'AstraZeneca, aux personnes âgées de 30 ans et plus, sans contre-indication, si la personne préfère être vaccinée plus rapidement plutôt que d'attendre un vaccin à ARN messager et si les avantages l'emportent sur les risques. Cette recommandation fournit aux provinces et aux territoires des orientations sur la manière d'optimiser l'utilisation du vaccin Janssen afin d'obtenir le plus de bénéfices possibles en matière de santé publique. L'analyse des avantages et des risques pour la santé publique de l'utilisation du vaccin Janssen peut varier selon les endroits. Les provinces et les territoires se doivent donc d'adapter le seuil d'âge recommandé par le CCNI en fonction de leur situation particulière, notamment l'épidémiologie locale de la COVID-19, l'approvisionnement en vaccins, la logistique, ainsi que les considérations relatives à l'équité. Par exemple, comme le vaccin de Janssen est à dose unique, celui-ci pourrait mieux convenir aux populations pour lesquelles il est plus difficile de programmer une seconde dose. Les décideurs pourront se référer à l'outil d'évaluation des risques dans la déclaration mise à jour qui les aidera à déterminer comment utiliser le vaccin Janssen. Le CCNI continue de recommander de façon préférentielle les vaccins autorisés à ARN messager contre la COVID-19 en raison de l'excellente protection qu'ils offrent et de leur profil d'innocuité, en particulier l'absence de signal de TIV. Le Canada s'est procuré et devrait recevoir suffisamment de vaccins à ARN messager pour vacciner l'entière population canadienne actuellement admissible avant l'automne 2021. Le CCNI a également renforcé sa recommandation de vaccination pendant la grossesse. Le CCNI recommande d'offrir une série complète de vaccins contre la COVID-19, de préférence avec un vaccin à ARN messager, aux femmes enceintes, si les avantages l'emportent sur les risques pour la mère et son fœtus, et si le consentement éclairé comprend une discussion concernant les données probantes sur l'utilisation de vaccins contre la COVID-19 dans cette population. Une étude récente aux États-Unis n'a montré aucun signal préoccupant quant à l'innocuité suite à l'administration des vaccins à ARN messager contre la COVID-19 pendant la grossesse. De plus, comme le traitement pendant la grossesse d'une TIV qui pourrait survenir après l'administration d'un vaccin à vecteur viral serait très complexe, le CCNI recommande l'utilisation préférentielle des vaccins à ARN messager pendant la grossesse. Le CCNI a également réitéré sa recommandation pour que les personnes précédemment infectées par le virus du SRAS-CoV-2 se voient offrir une série complète de vaccins contre la COVID-19. En l'absence de données sur l'efficacité d'une seule dose de vaccin chez les personnes ayant été préalablement infectées et compte tenu des données limitées sur l'innocuité d'une seconde dose, les personnes ayant été précédemment infectées par le SRAS-CoV-2 devraient continuer à recevoir une série complète de vaccins, quelle que soit la gravité de leur infection antérieure. Pour de plus amples renseignements sur les recommandations à jour du CCNI, y compris les données probantes et les justifications qui sous-tendent les recommandations, veuillez consulter la page web du CCNI. Pour conclure, je voudrais souligner que le CCNI continue d'examiner les données probantes et les données sur la COVID-19, ainsi que les vaccins contre la COVID-19 à mesure qu'ils sont disponibles. Le CCNI continuera de mettre à jour ses recommandations sur l'utilisation des vaccins contre la COVID-19 au Canada au besoin. Je vous remercie de votre temps. Il nous fera plaisir maintenant de répondre à vos questions.
Merci beaucoup. We'll now open the phone line to questions. Our experts are available to answer questions until 2:45 this afternoon. We ask that you limit yourself to one question and one follow-up question. We will be taking your questions in both official languages. Nous procédons à la séance des questions et réponses. Nos experts sont disponibles pour répondre aux questions jusqu'au 14h45 cet après-midi. Nous vous demandons de vous limiter à une question et seulement une question de suivi. Vous pouvez poser vos questions dans l'une des deux langues officielles. Operator, over to you.
Thank you. The first question is from Annie Bergeron-Oliver from CTV National News. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hi, Doctor. Thank you very much for taking my question. A few weeks ago, NACI suggested that mRNA vaccines were superior to AstraZeneca. Now the same recommendation is being made for Johnson & Johnson. With a plentiful supply of mRNA vaccines, based on your recommendation, why should anyone take the Johnson & Johnson vaccine?
Thank you for the question. Depending on how vaccines are being rolled out, some people will need to wait for an mRNA vaccine. That is why NACI has stressed that basically for an individual to choose to be vaccinated with either AstraZeneca or Janssen, they need to make an informed choice as to whether they would prefer to get vaccinated sooner with a Janssen or AstraZeneca vaccine or wait to receive the mRNA vaccine. And that would be an individual choice. They know that their risk tolerance for an adverse event and also know their personal situation, how much they may be able to protect themselves using public health measures. And those are all issues that would need to be taken into account when one decides whether to be vaccinated earlier with another vaccine.
Yeah, it's Dr. New. Maybe I can add to what Dr. Deek said from a sort of a provincial, maybe public health perspective. As you know, in many parts of the country, we're in the middle of a third wave, and there's lots of cases, and there's admissions to the ICU, and obviously, unfortunately, deaths as well. And so, if you look at it, all of the 4 approved vaccines in Canada, including the Janssen vaccine, have been shown through the trials to be effective in preventing serious consequences, serious illness, and deaths. And so I think that's something that's taken into account by the provincial program. So you're right, there's lots of issues at play, but at the end of the day, it's another tool in the toolbox. Provinces now have, in a sense, 4 vaccines at their disposal, and certainly taking all that into account, they will obviously use, I think, each of the vaccines to their best advantage in terms of offering it to their populations at risk, take into account factors like the local epidemiology in different parts of their individual provinces and territories. But as Dr. Deek said as well, at the end of the day, it's also an issue of informed consent that the vaccines offered to individuals, certainly from a provincial perspective, I think is taken into account in terms of offering the best vaccines to individuals, but the individuals themselves have to make an informed choice by having the information in front of them in terms of the risks and benefits.
And as a follow-up, It's just that your recommendation seems to be telling people to take Johnson & Johnson only if they don't want to wait for an mRNA vaccine. Does that not go against all the advice Canadians have been hearing time and time again to take the first vaccine available to them, that the first one you're eligible for is the best vaccine? And who do you believe should be prioritized for this?
So when the recommendations have evolved, when we first provided recommendations again for COVID vaccines in Canada, we did not know about the vaccine safety signal. Now there's been a vaccine safety signal, and we've modified the recommendations accordingly. This adverse event is very rare. But we don't know we're still learning more about it, and we don't know how common it is. Initially, we thought it was about 1 in a million. As more data has become available, now it's still very rare, but now it looks like it's closer to about 1 in 100,000. And that is why we've modified our recommendations and made changes as we learn more information. As Dr. New said, in terms of the risk benefit, that is very much dependent on where one lives and the type of activity one does where one lives. So, for instance, if someone's working from home, not really going out in a province or territory where there's not much disease, then they're in a very different situation than somebody that works in, let's say, a manufacturing plant, has difficulty wearing PPE, and in a province that has a very high burden of disease. So the risk benefit is very provincially dependent, as well as group dependent.
It's Dr. New. Maybe we can just add to what Dr. Deek said. You asked about sort of the possible use or indication of the new Janssen vaccine. Is, I think, in the opening remarks from both Dr. Deeks and Dr. Quach Tan in français. Certainly, the fact that the Janssen vaccine is sort of with the current product monograph a one-dose regime, and so with that, I think certainly our counterparts in the provinces and territories are taking that into account. If there are certain key populations that should be vaccinated, and it may be more difficult or challenging to bring them back for that quote second dose, then that's certainly one of the considerations that provincial and territorial authorities are taking into account as they consider the use of the Janssen vaccine in addition to all the other vaccines in their portfolio. Thank you.
Thank you. Operator, next question.
Thank you. The next question, la prochaine question est de Mélanie Marquis de La Presse. À vous la parole.
Merci. Ma question est pour Dr. Quach concernant les 300 000 doses qui sont arrivées au Canada la semaine passée, mais dont la distribution a été mise sur la glace. Qu'est-ce que vous pouvez nous dire à ce sujet-là? Est-ce que c'est quelque chose que vous étudiez ou c'est vraiment du ressort de Santé Canada?
Alors, c'est vraiment du ressort de Santé Canada, Madame Marquis. Présentement, Santé Canada est en train de finaliser l'évaluation du site manufacturier. Je pense qu'il reste encore des critères à remplir par le site, mais donc, tant et aussi longtemps que leur enquête ne sera pas terminée, les vaccins ne seront pas disponibles, mais le CCNI n'est absolument pas impliqué dans cette portion-là de l'évaluation. Merci.
Oui, c'est Dr. New, je peux confirmer ce que Dr. Quach Tan a dit. Oui, c'est vraiment le travail de les collègues à Santé Canada, et ils sont en train de travailler étroitement avec le Food and Drug Administration aux États-Unis pour vraiment faire une enquête. Qu'est-ce qui se passe à l'usine? C'est en anglais, je ne sais pas en français, Good Manufacturing Practices. Ça fait partie de leur processus de l'approbation, et on attend impatiemment avec les résultats de leur évaluation.
Oui, mais dans ce cas-là, ma question de suivi serait pour le Dr. New. On a appris vendredi quand même assez tard que la distribution était bloquée. Quand est-ce que Santé Canada a appris qu'il y avait eu des pépins manufacturiers dans cette usine-là, qu'il y avait déjà eu des problèmes d'une telle nature dont le New York Times avait parlé au début du mois d'avril.
Moi, je ne peux pas parler sur les détails. Si vous parlez d'une date exacte, moi, je ne suis pas au courant avec une date exacte, mais ce que je comprends à Santé Canada, avant, avec les renseignements, c'était pas clair que peut-être que les doses de Janssen, le vaccin de Janssen, peut-être impliqué avec un problème à l'usine. Et maintenant, on sait que peut-être un ingrédient, on peut dire, pour le vaccin. Oui, peut-être que ça vient de cette usine et c'est donc Santé Canada travaille maintenant étroitement avec le fabricant et aussi avec les autorités de Food and Drug Administration pour vraiment analyser c'est quoi les détails exactement, qu'est-ce qui se passait avec la fabrication des doses de vaccin Janssen. À part de ça, on peut-être on peut pouvoir fournir peut-être des dates plus exactes et précisées, mais pour l'instant, c'est ça ce que je comprends. Merci.
Merci. Operator, next question, please.
Thank you. The next question is from David Atkin from Global News. Please go ahead.
Well, thanks very much. Maybe Dr. New, I could just have you perhaps provide an update on the release on Friday night about the holding back of the currents and the Janssen vaccine. Could you give us an update on what was the problem with that particular shipment and where we stand today on getting those doses into the country?
Thank you very much for the question. So just to sort of put it at a sort of a high level, not to get to all of the minute details. Certainly, what I would say is that Health Canada, with the initial approval of the Janssen vaccine, that was based on obviously clinical trial data and other information to look at the efficacy and the safety of the vaccine. So that's one issue. But another part of what they do in terms of their due diligence for approval is also look at the actual sort of quality assurance for the actual production of the vaccine. Involving individual factories, and that's the situation in this case. And so Health Canada was informed and became aware that a specific facility, obviously we all know the emergent facility that was involved in the fact that I think one of the ingredients that's actually used in the production of this vaccine did come from that facility, and therefore Health Canada has been working very closely with their counterparts in the Food and Drug Administration, as well as with the manufacturer, to get more information, more details, to actually assure themselves from a quality assurance process that there is or isn't an issue or risk or problem with that specific ingredient that was sourced from that a specific facility, and how that obviously was used in the production of the vaccine. And that's why the vaccine is sort of in a holding pattern. It's certainly sort of being held in freezers in good condition, and until obviously Health Canada does its due diligence. And I can't give a timeline. I would leave that to Health Canada, but I think I think we can all appreciate they want to do a good, thorough job as quickly as possible. That if there is not a problem, that they can obviously release the vaccine to be distributed as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thanks for that. And follow up, I guess, for Dr. Deeks and for NACI. There isn't any changes today about dose intervals. And I'm wondering, though, if this is an area of discussion right now for NACI, given that just not a couple hours ago, the president of the Canadian Cardiology Society was in front of the Health Committee, the Commons Health Committee, saying for healthcare workers, other vulnerable workers, a 16-week interval between two mRNA doses does not provide the kind of protection that healthcare workers, in this individual's view, ought to get. I'm wondering if you have some thoughts about, now that we're getting 2 million doses of Pfizer a week for the next 4 weeks, whether or not it is time, in fact, to recommend changing the dose interval back towards something that the manufacturer recommends.
Thanks for the question. In terms of the interval, I just want to clarify what we've always indicated up to 4 months. And in fact, I would suggest, given our third wave and what is being experienced across the country, trying to ensure that the majority of Canadians get their first dose fast has actually really kept us in good standing in the third wave. That is still the priority to ensure that Canadians get a first dose of AstraZeneca vaccine. Or sorry, not AstraZeneca vaccine, of COVID-19 vaccines. In terms of the efficiency with which provinces and territories are rolling this out, as soon as individuals get their first dose, then there would be an ability for second doses. Certain jurisdictions have made some modifications and changes in their policy and are giving certain groups earlier second doses, but those policy decisions are really resting with the provinces and territories. We're on track to have most Canadians receive their first dose in June, and as we said, there's enough mRNA vaccines to receive for Canadians to be fully vaccinated by the fall. Thanks.
Thank you. Operator, next question, please. Thank you. La prochaine question est de Catherine Lévesque de la Presse canadienne. À vous la parole.
Oui, bonjour à vous tous. Et avant de poser mes questions, j'aimerais juste demander est-ce qu'on prenne toutes les questions possibles sur la ligne parce que je comprends que vous voulez finir à 45, mais vous avez quand même commencé en retard. Alors, ma première question, c'est pour Dr. Quach. C'était ma compréhension que le CCNI, faisait ses recommandations aujourd'hui au sujet du vaccin Janssen parce que la distribution devait commencer aux provinces. Or, on a vu ce qui s'est passé le vendredi, finalement, que Santé Canada a bloqué la distribution en raison des ingrédients dans le vaccin. Je me demandais pourquoi faire quand même ces recommandations quand même aujourd'hui, pourquoi ne pas avoir attendu finalement que Santé Canada distribue le vaccin?
Je vous dirais qu'on espère que la distribution va se faire d'ici 1 à 2 semaines. Dans ce contexte-là, les données devraient être relativement stables. C'est sûr que la seule raison pour laquelle on retenait, en fait, on aurait pu faire les recommandations plus tôt, mais la raison principale pour laquelle on a essayé de se coller le plus possible avec le moment de déploiement de ce vaccin-là, c'était pour s'assurer d'avoir le plus de détails possible quant aux complications de TIV, donc de thrombopénie et thrombose avec plaquettes, avec immunitaire, enfin bref, le TTIV. Mais donc dans ce contexte-là, de le déployer, de sortir notre recommandation aujourd'hui nous a permis d'avoir le résultat des délibérations du comité américain. Et je pense que ce qui pourrait bouger entre maintenant et dans 1 semaine, c'est que le nombre de cas continue à augmenter avec le nombre de doses administrées, mais en pensant que le taux va rester à peu près le même. Donc on a vraiment utilisé un taux moyen qui nous permet de faire nos recommandations. Donc, j'ai pas l'impression qu'il y ait tant d'éléments que ça qui devraient changer dans les 2 prochaines semaines. Si jamais, évidemment, Santé Canada doit reporter le déploiement de ce vaccin-là pendant encore 2 mois, puis ça, je dis n'importe quoi, mais à ce moment-là, on réévaluera la recommandation, mais je pense que pour l'instant, ça devrait tenir la route pendant quelques semaines. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Et puis, ça va un peu dans le même sens que ma collègue de CTV, mais je me demandais pourquoi est-ce que le CCNI insiste sur le fait aujourd'hui que les vaccins à ARN messager sont meilleurs ou, disons, plus efficaces. Du moins, ça semble contredire un peu ce qu'on nous dit jusqu'à maintenant et ce qu'on a tenté de nous dire par rapport à AstraZeneca, entre autres, pour renforcer la confiance des Canadiens. Je me demandais juste s'il y avait un changement notable dans votre communication et sinon, pourquoi?
En fait, depuis le début, on a toujours dit que les vaccins ARN messagers étaient préférentiels par rapport aux vaccins à vecteur viral. Je vous dirais que l'enjeu est pas tant d'un point de vue d'efficacité de terrain, mais d'un point de vue d'innocuité. Alors, je vous donne comme exemple, vous habitez dans une région où il n'y a absolument pas de COVID, prendriez-vous le risque, même s'il est à 1 sur 100 000, d'avoir un vaccin pour lequel une complication sévère pourrait survenir, ou si vous savez que dans 2 semaines, vous pouvez avoir le vaccin ARN messager, l'attendriez-vous? Et c'est vraiment dans ce contexte-là d'évaluation personnelle du risque de recevoir un vaccin plus précocement par rapport à l'attente de vaccins ARN messagers. Puis évidemment, cette attente-là va diverger selon votre groupe d'âge. Alors, c'est sûr que les plus jeunes vont attendre plus longtemps que les personnes plus âgées et qu'en bout de ligne, le risque de thrombose ne varie pas selon l'âge, mais votre risque de complication de la COVID, lui, va varier selon l'âge et selon la situation autour de vous. Donc, si vous êtes dans une province ou une région où il y a énormément de cas de COVID, ben, ça vaut tout à fait la peine de se faire vacciner plus tôt pour avoir une protection plus rapide. Mais il fallait le communiquer de façon tout à fait transparente. Et je vous dirais que la semaine dernière, quand le premier cas de décès au Québec est survenu post-vaccin d'AstraZeneca, c'est dans ce même contexte-là que nous avons réexpliqué notre recommandation. C'est-à-dire que de façon transparente, les vaccins à vecteurs viraux sont associés avec un risque très rare, mais un risque qui existe de thrombose avec des conséquences potentiellement létales. Donc, c'est vraiment c'est ce message-là que nous passons depuis le début. Merci.
Merci. Operator, next question.
Thank you. The next question is from Rafi Boudjikanian from CBC News. Please go ahead.
Thanks for that. I just want to go back to some of what you have said about mRNA vaccines being the preferential option. Can you just tell us, are you now saying don't take the first vaccine that's offered, wait for the one you want?
So what we're saying is that, and what we've said all along, is that the mRNA vaccines are the preferred vaccine. And yet, given the epidemiology, the viral vector vaccines are very effective vaccines, but there is a safety signal, a safety risk, as Dr. Quash Tan just explained. And the issue with the safety signal is that although it's very rare, it is very serious. And so individuals need to have an informed choice to be vaccinated with the first vaccine that's available or to wait for an mRNA vaccine. They need to be aware that those are the options available to them.
Okay, thanks. And as a follow-up, I just want to return to the question of those 300,000 doses. Why was the public only told Friday evening about the issues connected to the Baltimore plant?
That's a Health Canada issue, so I'll refer that to Dr. New.
It's Dr. New. I can't really speak for Health Canada. I think they certainly were doing their due diligence in terms of getting the information with respect to what was happening at that plant, with respect to a specific ingredient involved. There's obviously some preliminary work that needs to be done in terms of getting the right information, the right data, to be able to then communicate that, as you said, to Canadians in an open, transparent manner. So that certainly is what I understand has happened. They didn't have a sort of an early indication beforehand until it came to light. I think probably with respect to discussions they've been having with the FDA and others, because I think it was the FDA that first brought to light some of the issues in terms of quality assurance at this plant, and then by doing some further sort of investigative work, it became apparent that a key ingredient in the vaccine for this particular shipment of doses to Canada was potentially involved. And that's why Health Canada is doing its work, its homework, working with the FDA and the manufacturer. And that's why they put out that notice, as you said, on Friday.
Thank you. Operator, next question, please.
Thank you. The next question is from Mia Rapson from the Canadian Press. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering, just sort of following up on this idea that you're not saying that the effectiveness of AstraZeneca or Johnson & Johnson is necessarily worse, but that it's just because they have this safety signal. there are now about 2 million Canadians who have been given this AstraZeneca vaccine and are hearing this and thinking, well, did we get duped into taking this vaccine? What do you say to those 2 million people who now are sitting there wondering if they should not have gotten this vaccine or whether they should even get the second dose of it?
So I would say to them that they have been offered a effective vaccine. We communicated. We've been very consistent in terms of our messaging through NACI that vaccines, all COVID vaccines, are safe and effective. Individuals that have received an AstraZeneca vaccine and are worried should be vigilant for the symptoms, particularly if it's within 1 to 3 weeks after receiving a vaccine. They need to be aware of the signal, and if they get any of the symptoms, such as severe headache, they should seek care immediately. After that point in time, after about 3 or 4 weeks, there is absolutely nothing to worry about in terms of having VIT. In terms of the second dose, what is happening right now is we, as a committee, are looking at options for mixed schedules. As of now, though, there is no reason for people to not receive a second dose of AstraZeneca vaccine or mRNA vaccine. And NACI will be making a recommendation about mixed schedules as soon as we see some information from some studies that are looking specifically at mixed schedules.
Thank you. And I'm just to follow up also on the idea of the delayed second doses. Is NACI doing any further study or work on data on whether or not delaying the second dose is a good idea or not? I mean, I hear from lots of different groups sort of lobbying that they should get their second dose earlier. I'm just wondering if there's any studies forthcoming that NACI will be changing its recommendations based on, or if that issue is done as far as you're concerned.
So we don't do studies as a committee. We review the results of studies, but absolutely we continue to get presentations and synthesis of literature that is looking at effectiveness of one dose, and as well as effectiveness of 2 doses. I agree. We are hearing as well, particularly from my provincial hat as opposed to my NACI hat, from groups that are feeling that they should be an exception to the rule. And, I think one thing to keep in mind is that for certain subsets, like subpopulations, we actually don't have information about how effective 2 doses of a vaccine is, of COVID-19 vaccines are. So that would include people with immunodeficiencies or people suffering from cancer. And so obviously every Canadian needs to have a full series of COVID-19 vaccines, so 2 doses for most vaccines, other than the Janssen product. But importantly, the group, it's just as important for people with immunodeficiencies that everybody around them gets vaccinated. So if they don't respond, whether it's to 1 dose or 2 doses, the population around them is vaccinated. So there's many advantages to ensuring the most number of people are vaccinated as quickly as possible. But we do keep looking at the data. Thanks.
And Matthew Tunis here, Executive Secretary for NACI from the Public Health Agency of Canada. Just to add to Dr. Deeks's remarks, we know that many provinces and territories are actually doing real-time vaccine effectiveness monitoring, including monitoring of this first dose so far. And so, as Dr. Deeks mentioned, and we're facilitating that information to come forward to the committees so that they can continue monitoring, continue seeing, how well individuals are being protected over time with that first dose. So it is something that's being very actively monitored, not only at this national level as we see the information come up, but also at the provincial territorial level. They're doing, in many cases, weekly monitoring to keep a close check on how that first dose rollout and effectiveness is progressing. Thanks.
Thank you very much. This is all the time that we have today for today's technical briefing.
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.